Thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to talk about using Heroku to extend the value of your Salesforce deployment. I'm joined on stage by my two wonderful colleagues. I have Gopal Patel from Get Feedback and Peter Shankar from Mission Capital. This is Dreamforce, and as much as I love the product and as much as I love Salesforce and I love to talk about the many wonderful things that our products can do, it's far more interesting to hear our customers actually tell their stories and talk about their successes. So again, if you're coming in, please, there's plenty of seats in the front. So no Salesforce presentation would be complete without our forward-looking statements. We do ask that, we simply ask that any purchase decisions you make are based on the currently available state of the software. So here's what we're going to do this morning. Just going to ask you a couple questions to get started. Can I see by a show of hands who in the room is a developer? Wonderful. So we're going to ask a couple questions to get started. We're going to review just a couple of high-level use cases to give some examples of things that you can do combining Heroku with Force.com, and then my colleagues and I are going to run through a couple of demos. Again, at the end, we will have time for questions. So let me get a show of hands again. Have you ever developed applications on the Force.com platform? Okay. Have you developed applications on Heroku? Okay. Have you ever spent a significant amount of time building an application on Force.com and gotten to the end and thought, maybe that was the hard way? Okay. And thank you for being honest, and I'm in that boat as well. So as we talk this morning, one point I want to begin with, and it's simply this: that if you're vaguely aware of Salesforce, you probably know Salesforce because of the Sales Cloud. If you're a little more than vaguely aware, you say, okay, sales and service. And if you're moderately aware of Salesforce, you're aware that the Salesforce products themselves are written on a wonderful platform called Force.com. And we provide that platform as a custom development platform so you can develop your own applications. Now, Heroku extends that a little further. So it moves from, Force.com expands the world of possibilities, and Heroku, expands it even a great deal further. And that's really what we're going to focus on this morning. So as we start to look at some examples of when you would look at using Heroku in your deployment, 2 years ago at Dreamforce, we first brought up the concept of OData and bringing external data into your data model. We can do the same thing with files. And, keeping Heroku is central to the mix. You have the ability to create this data hub and still maintain the value of Salesforce, Force.com as the, excuse me while I'm trying to think of a term, and still keep the value of Force.com as the master source. Okay, if I'm doing something like containerized microservices, I'm probably going to find this difficult to do on Force.com alone. And to take that even a step further, as soon as I try to scale to the potential of a web application or B2C, it's something that I'm going to have a difficult time doing on Force alone. Now, Gopal, a former Salesforce employee, you've co-founded a company called getfeedback.com, and can you give us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so delivering B2C apps, that requires sort of scaling when big events happen or people send out big emails. So we have to be able to scale our services to handle a big influx of people taking surveys. So Heroku lets us do that very easily, scale just computing power. But also the pixel perfect part that's mentioned here, Heroku handles all of our builds and all the asset pipeline, serving out, compiling different front-end frameworks. So we really leverage that and deploy our app using that.
Okay, so you saw the value of Heroku right from the start.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and we're looking forward to your wonderful demo in just a few minutes. So thank you very much. Moving back to just use cases for a moment, if I'm doing something that's computationally intensive, you may or may not be aware, but it may be difficult to do on force.com alone. This is something that's also governed by a governor limit. Data warehousing, unlocking the true potential of your data. And for this, I'm going to turn to Peter. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Mission Capital?
Yeah, so we started out with Salesforce as our data warehouse. We were, kind of in a luxurious position with that. But as our organization grew, as we extended past a single line of business and into multiple lines of businesses with several orgs, the sort of consolidation and exposure of that data became extremely important. And so we leverage Heroku to deliver information across business lines, across clients, and for internal reporting as well.
So really data as a service.
Exactly.
And we're looking forward to your demo as well. Thank you. Okay. One last use case before we get to the truly exciting part. If I'm doing something like Internet of Things with this, huge volume of, potentially, millions, if not billions of events, storage may become a consideration. And this might be this is definitely a great use case for Heroku, the ability to ingest these events and then pass the significant events along to Salesforce as the system of record. That said, let's go ahead and jump in our demos, and I'm going to again turn the podium over to Gopal.
So thanks, Dan. So Get Feedback is basically customer feedback or surveys or customer experience for Salesforce. It's about collecting, survey data and feeding it back into your CRM system. We're used by many brands around the world, brands that use Salesforce. You might recognize some of these. We were started by the four of us. We were all ex-Salesforce employees, and one of my co-founders, Craig, was the CMO of Salesforce. And as part of his job, you might have received this. You might have got a customer satisfaction survey from Salesforce, and it used to look like that. It's outdated, not mobile friendly, got poor response rates, negative brand perception, right? So you get this beautiful email. But after that point, you go to take the survey on your phone, and it's just this really bad experience. So we set out to sort of fix that. So Get Feedback delivers a modern, mobile-ready way to take surveys. It works really great on your phone. It carries that brand past your email marketing into the survey itself, or your apps. For example, the Dreamforce app uses us to solicit feedback for sessions, things like that. So it carries that all the way through. You get higher response rates, all that sort of stuff. But it's not enough to just have a really nice survey. You have to have that stuff go back into where all your other data lives, which is Salesforce for most of us, right? So when we set out to build this company, we knew we had to build a powerful integration. So the data had to flow back into Salesforce, and the different parts of the customer journey or life cycle which triggered surveys to go out. Like, for example, someone ends a support call, or they finish a chat session through Live Agent, or they finish their product trial. All these events and parts of the data live within Salesforce already. So triggering is also a really important piece of this. And so building on this, the Salesforce platform, different people model their data in different ways. And so what we chose to do is to build Get Feedback as a connected app. So we could connect into very different types of orgs, and people could set up how they want the data to flow, what triggers surveys to go out, things like that. And we chose Heroku to scale and help us build the business. So let me get into the demo. So this is what Get Feedback looks like if you're sitting in what we call Surveys Home. This is where you can see all your surveys. Let's say I'm using Service Cloud, and I want to build a survey for cases that are closed, meaning when an agent closes a case, we want to get feedback from the customer about how they were handled, how the case was handled. So you might create a survey that looks like this. We've built Get Feedback to be very user-friendly in the sense that if you've ever used any sort of PowerPoint or Keynote, it's similar to that. You build your questions out here, and you can preview it on a mobile device, see what it looks like, try it out. You can add survey logic, to skip questions based on people's answers, ask them additional clarification questions, all that sort of stuff. And finally, you can also map that data back into Salesforce. So depending on the way that you model your data in Salesforce, you can maybe create a new custom object in every response. Or in our case, what we really want to do is update fields on a case. We want to take the answers that the customer gave, and these are the different questions at the bottom, and push them into different Salesforce fields. So let's see how this works. Let's say I'm in the console, and I'm working on this case, and I've finished working on the case. Demos never work when you want them to. There we go. OK, so I close the case. And this can be implemented a bunch of different ways. In this case, we're just using a simple workflow to send out an email, but you can use a journey builder. You could use more complicated Salesforce pieces. And let's see what that looks like when you get it on your phone. So let's say I got this email. And I can see the survey right here. You can see that we had a field that was in Salesforce back in the survey that got populated with the person's name. I was very satisfied. Took more than 10 minutes. We have very many different question types, so you can include pictures, things like that. And so once you finish taking the survey, that data feeds back into Salesforce. I'm just going to refresh the screen here. And you can see all that stuff is right over here under the Get Feedback section. So we had added a bunch of custom fields, and they're in our page layout. That's basically it.
So I love this, but so I have to point out that you're engaged in the customer journey really at every step.
Yep.
And the entire way you've maintained Salesforce as the system of record.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yep. I'm sure you'll be around later to answer questions.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. I also want to put you on the spot and just talk about things that you've demoed that maybe you couldn't, simply put, that you couldn't do in Force.com alone.
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about the technologies that we used. Being in Force.com, records data in a certain way, but we really need to store data in different ways, basically different indexing schemes. So we use Heroku Postgres to store most of the data, but we also use Rethink and Redis as different ways of indexing the data, so we can very quickly, compute like big aggregations, things like that on the fly. So that's part of what we use Heroku for. Computationally intensive, like when I talked about spikes of traffic that happen when you send out a survey for an event, things like that. And we leverage multiple languages. So our backend is built on Ruby, but we have a lot of JavaScript that experience that you saw taking the survey and even building the survey has many languages involved. So JavaScript, Sass, all that stuff gets compiled by the Heroku pipeline. And then deployed together.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And this is a quick, okay.
I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, this is a quick overview of just sort of what our architecture looks like.
Awesome. Thank you. Peter, would you like to talk about Mission Capital?
Sure. All right, so at Mission we use, we're actually also a pretty good example of a B2C environment where we, really B2B, where we leverage, we have an application stack that does trade support, but what I'm going to talk about is really data warehousing, and I'll show you how that feeds into our trade support side. So what do we do? We're essentially a capital markets advisor. We solve really complex real estate loan portfolio problems and other capital markets problems. And really this funnels into two different services. If you kind of abstract away from our business lines, it's diligencing the data and then executing on that data. And in the case I'm going to talk about is loan trade support. So one of the hallmarks of the mortgage and loan industries in the U.S. is that there is really poor standardization, as I'm sure you're all familiar with in various respects. So the mortgage industry has standards for residential loans. It seems like there's new standards popping up every day. There are proprietary bank standards. There are no standards. We just get data that we have to sort of figure out on our own what it is, and it presents a challenge generally, especially when you have a lot of consolidation in the market. And so one of the value adds that we provide is really standardizing this data. Some of our clients, you name it, every retail bank is a client of ours. We do a little bit of international business as well, but for the most part, it's lenders in the U.S. and insurance companies, hedge funds. So very specifically, the use case or the use case that we support most regularly is we get data from our client, we load it into Salesforce. We're a Force.com platform customer. We do something called scrub, which is essentially cleansing that data. We augment it with additional data that we ingest from PDFs and other sources. And then we run basic internal reporting. So how quickly are we scrubbing? What is the context of the portfolio in the greater market cycle? So maybe subperforming loans are trading very well. We can get that type of information up to our execution team, and so that they can drive some sort of action on it. And so then we sort of hand it off to a trade process. That's where we go from diligence to execution. We add potential buyers, so we expose data through our loan sale process. We expose that data that we scrubbed, and then we sort of compile user data as well. Who's approved, who's not approved, so on and so forth. Really, our customers then are that of sort of a marketplace. We have customers on the demand side and customers on the supply side. We sort of view our internal users as customers as well. But all of them have different consumption needs for that data. So the challenge that has developed because we've grown is really that we've got a lot of different data sources, and predominantly they're Salesforce orgs. The thing that we've tried to do in the last 2 years is unify those data sources somehow. The other thing I sort of alluded to earlier, which is unifying the data so that we can present it consistently. We're in the financial services space, so it's like Excel and PDFs, and so we've got to be able to deliver formatted data in a nice PDF format with charts and graphs and whatnot. The other thing that Dan mentioned before is that it's if you've gone down the path of using Salesforce as a data warehouse, it quickly becomes a challenge. One of those challenges is storage. This has really alleviated a lot of our storage needs by it's allowing us to dump multiple org data into a Postgres database, and I'll show you what that looks like. But we're certainly a cost savings there. And then sort of a future thing that we're looking at now is exposing some of the data that we have in our data warehouse to our clients and letting them slice and dice and take actionable steps. So really summing up the problem, you can kind of crystallize this a little bit by looking at our trading platform that is exposed to our buyers. And so what you're seeing here is a row of data, and you can see the sources of that data. So the name of the transaction comes from our execution or CRM org. Some of the asset-specific information comes from our due diligence org. We have other information that gets calculated on the fly And we were doing it in batch Apex. We're slowly moving towards doing it in Heroku. And then we have just basic application data, so user data that lives in Postgres. And so the solution we started implementing about 2 years ago is a Postgres and Rails solution. We built out a whole data warehouse. We normalized the data. We consume it. Originally was a pub sub application. We've since deprecated that and are moving towards Heroku Connect, which is a great solution if you haven't looked at it. And then we wrap Postgres in a microservice and let others consume that data. I alluded to exposing analytical functionality to our clients. We're looking at Wave for communities, but that Wave would be a consumer of the microservices or the API that we're exposing. And so a little bit on the architecture, this was a little bit more complicated until we found Heroku Connect. So you can see one-to-many orgs, the trade support org at the top. That feeds directly into Postgres. It's near real time, more than what we need. And then we expose that data over with an API. We've got 3 APIs right now: a basic read API, a reporting API that consumes some data and then delivers a PDF. And then we are currently working on a compliance API, which is going to support a brand new business line that we have. And you can see the applications that really consume that. So the trade application, which I'm going to show you, and then compliance reporting here soon. So let's jump into a demo. All right, so this is our, I'm going to try to type with one hand here. So this is our trade application. The users here are buyers. And so they'll visit the site, they'll take a look at the data, and then they place bids. So we've got some dummy data here. So in the slide I showed you earlier, let me expand this a little bit. So in the slide I showed you earlier, the source for this particular piece of information is from one org, and some of this, some of the data is from other orgs. So let's just jump in and see how we can play around with this. So this is the actual execution opportunity that we have. Let's say Salesforce doesn't want to disclose that they're selling debt. So we'll change this to undisclosed. Hit save. Oops. So Heroku Connect picks up on that change and commits that change to the database, and then makes that instantly available for us here. So you can see that it went from Salesforce to undisclosed. So that's changed from one org, and then so that was the execution org. Then we have our diligence org, where let's say let's actually dig into this a little bit. So this has a pool. I'm noticing that there's a missing asset that we want to sell. That's something that our diligence team would push towards execution. And so that asset is this particular loan, and I can make that visible. And then let's refresh this. There you go. It pops up, has a nice picture. You can take a look at that asset. So we're, again, same use case, except we're pushing from different org. And then we're consuming our reporting API, which delivers a PDF. Let's see here. There it is. And there you go. So data from multiple sources being consumed and then delivered for display to an end user.
That's awesome. I can see that you're clearly all about the data. You've also hit several other of the use cases that I ran through pretty quickly at the beginning of our presentation this morning. Can you talk again about the value that Heroku brought to the overall solution?
Yeah, one thing we haven't really talked about is because we're in the financial services industry, we're heavily regulated. And from a compliance perspective, they're kind of holding our hands all the way through. It's very important for us to have the proper protocol around our data. I think this has allowed not just our engineering team to operate at a faster velocity, but really the business to operate at a faster velocity. Both important things as you're going through tremendous growth, and we've pretty much grown 30% year over year over the last 5 years.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I really do want to thank both of my co-presenters today. One more quick example to talk about. So something that Peter and Gopal have very wonderfully demonstrated is building applications that start with Force.com or use Force.com of the system of record. I wanted to also mention something of a simple archiving use case that actually improves the usability of the Salesforce org itself. So hopefully everybody in this room is or will be a longtime Salesforce customer. And there's always the potential that your data could grow and, well, hopefully grow exponentially. Now that said, there's not always the same value in all of that data. So there's data that's important to me today that may not be important to me, next year or maybe even next week. So we look at an archive solution to say, let's take the data in our Salesforce org, and it still has value. We don't want to eliminate it entirely where we've lost it. But what if we could move that outside of Salesforce and maintain the integrity of our data model? And that's what we talk about when we talk about an archive solution, that maybe I have leads that are a year old and they simply never materialized into anything more. I don't want to abandon them. I still want to keep them. I still want to have all the references on them that I have today. So what we can do with an archive is simply rely on, excuse me. And I'm sorry, for some reason I'm not seeing the screen update. What I've done is I've used Heroku Connect to synchronize my data, and then based on rules that we've specified, leads that are a year old, tasks that have been closed for more than a year, I want to go ahead and move these to an archive. I can go ahead and expose them back to Salesforce using Salesforce Connect and external objects, and I can even look at them as related lists the same way I would my active tasks and my active leads. And apologies for not being able to demonstrate this. Okay. That said, I want to thank everyone for attending this morning. For more information, we have a couple of related sessions on building Force.com apps with Heroku. Another session on Friday about using continuous delivery. Of course, there's Trailhead and the ability to earn Heroku Trailhead badges. And at this point, we are available to answer any questions you might have. I will ask, if you do have a question again, please move to the microphone in the center of the room. And thank you, everyone, for your time this morning. Questions? Yes.
Can you hear me? Nope. I can come up there.
Oh, can I take the microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of the common themes I saw is the need to refresh. Does Heroku have ability to use WebSockets so that you don't have to do that?
Do you want to? Oh.
Yeah, Heroku does, and we actually leverage that quite a bit. You can use third-party add-ons like Pusher, but Heroku now has native support for WebSockets. So if you're actually sitting in Get Feedback and you sit in our Analyze view, which I didn't get a chance to show, but you can see results coming in real time. We have our own dashboards where you can see them update in real time as survey responses come back in. Yeah.
It's a wonderful question. Thank you. The short answer is yes. We can speak at the podium. The microphone's live.
Hi, I got a question about the Heroku Connect. How, you do have a sync whenever you updated or a value, and it automatically go to Heroku Connect. My question is, how do you sync up the metadata? Is it automatically when I add a new field in an org, does it automatically update the Heroku?
Be very happy to, I'm sorry. Yeah, go for it. Be very happy to demonstrate this downstairs. Yes, at the point that you change, you go into Heroku Connect and you decide, I want to change the number of fields or I want to add fields to what I'm already syncing. It's actually going to go ahead and alter the table that it's built within Heroku Connect and resynchronize the data. So it is dynamic in that regard.
I may have missed the Mission Capital demonstration, but with regards to portals, communities, this is an expensive option. I'm not sure if that's what you were demonstrating because I walked in the middle, but can you talk about how Heroku can be used for that, and is there any issue with using Heroku for extending Salesforce to your customers, partners, et cetera?
Yeah, no, it's not a communities portal. It's our homegrown portal. It's a Rails app basically. I think there's a few challenges, I guess, that you have to really consider. Probably, a big one is what data you want to push through. We were using a library called RESTforce, which I think it consumed like the Salesforce streaming API. That got significantly simplified with Heroku Connect. And the rest of it is, once you have the data, then you're for us is building a CRUD app essentially on top of that data. It's sort of it depends on your comfort level with actually developing with given any infrastructure. And I think you don't have to build it in Rails. I think Gopal could probably speak to all the different stacks that Heroku supports, but it's a lot.
Hi, I have a question in regards to authentication. Both of you showed solutions where you have external apps connecting to Heroku or through Heroku to Salesforce. How did you deal with authenticating that connection? Is it done ad hoc authentication into Heroku? Are you reusing Salesforce authentication? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question and one that we've spent significant engineering hours on. So we use Devise, which is a Rails gem. It handles the level of security that we want. The way that it unsyncs back is we basically have a user object, a custom user object, not the Salesforce standard user object that then syncs back into Salesforce, which kind of brings up another point. Heroku Connect is bidirectional, so we can push data back into Salesforce as well.
For our app, our user authentication is our own. Like people who sign into Get Feedback, they have their own accounts, but they can OAuth into Salesforce. So people actually can OAuth into both their sandbox and their production orgs, and that way they can build surveys against sandbox data, try them out, test it all out, and then move over to production. And so the auth is handled separately in that sense.
Thank you.
Hey, the data archiving, the Heroku have any kind of storage limitations like a Salesforce, or we can get some kind of SQL Oracle database we can connect in the backend, or only the Heroku have their own database?
So So when you use Heroku Connect, can you hear me? So when you use Heroku Connect, you're synchronizing your data between a Salesforce org and a Postgres database that's running on Heroku. When you provision that Postgres database, just like the majority of the Heroku add-ons, you specify the tier that you want, and as part of that tier, it's the amount of storage and the amount of RAM that you're allocating with your database. So
okay.
the database is provisioned based on size.
Okay, so the database, I can choose any database, right? It's Oracle or SQL, or Heroku have their own database?
I didn't understand the
Sorry.
question.
Can we, Heroku have their own database, or we can go and choose our own database like SQL Server or Oracle database?
So for Heroku Connect, it works specifically with Postgres on Heroku.
Oh, okay.
Okay. For outside of Heroku Connect, you're free to use really any database that you'd like. Heroku Connect is specific between one Salesforce org and a Postgres database that's running on Heroku.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to ask one more question about Heroku in terms of the capability over Informatica, because we're using Informatica to extend Salesforce functionality. Because of the limitations, we send a lot of data to Informatica and then transform it and then come back to the Salesforce. And I see opportunity over here that Heroku has maybe over Informatica. So can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I can. We actually implemented our version 1 with Informatica, Informatica Cloud. In fact, our chief data architect is sitting right in front if you want to have a chat with him. I think, what we try to do, and this is no knock on Informatica, I think they're a great product, but we try to eliminate the number of points that you've got to jump through. And for us, the application was hosted on Heroku. We are, and we want to be able to consume that data directly. The data was eventually going to end up in Postgres hosted on Heroku anyway, so this was sort of a natural step for us. But as far as the difficulty to make that transition, it was pretty seamless. We were pulling data day one. It's a matter of specifying the object you want to pull down, the custom fields that you want to pull down, and then pushing a button and you're good to go. And then your application or whatever is consuming that data has to be set up, but very, very seamless.
So can I say, the main advantage for Heroku over Informatica is easier for integration side? More stable?
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more stable in our experience. I think one of the biggest reasons that we chose is that there are vendor synergies here, right? And so you have people that are intimately familiar with Salesforce architecture, and then people that are intimately familiar with Heroku and Postgres architecture. And I think that they're working 24/7 to get that running. You look at sort of loss rates and downtime, and Heroku Connect so far has beaten out Informatica in most of those categories.
All right, thank you very much.
Apologies, I'm looking at the clock. I think we have time for one more question. But please, we're downstairs in the dev zone behind the hollow tree, which actually makes sense if you've been there, and it's awesome. So please come down and talk to us there. But if there's another question, we'll take it now.
Okay, cool. Right before the Mission Capital demo, there was a mention that you were porting over batch Apex jobs into Heroku. Was that for computationally intensive work? And if it was, can you go into a little bit more detail about how you're doing it?
So can you repeat that question? Sorry.
So it sounded like you said that you're moving batch Apex jobs over to use Heroku. Is that computationally intensive work that you're bringing over versus, call out intensive work? And if it is, can you go into a little bit more detail about it?
Yeah. So really, the reason that we're doing that is we're moving from batch Apex to a worker in Heroku because the business requirement is dictating that it's a very complex join, and not bashing on Salesforce, but it's difficult to do a complex SQL query and then have that maintained very well, it's extremely easy to do it in Heroku. And you can even, there are you can use data clips to test it. You can, you can expose that particular piece as a service. I think there were just too many sort of scale advantages that we wanted to exploit in the future that it made sense to push it over to Heroku.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to lose the room, but thank you for coming this morning.
No.